Hello, everyone, and welcome to January 6th, the Wednesday after the Feast of the Epiphany. And Merry Christmas as the Christmas season continues until this coming Sunday. And Happy New Year. And I hope the new year is much brighter and more hopeful for all of us. I was a teacher for about 15 years. And during that time, I taught in an all-girls high school in Baltimore. And it's interesting teaching in an all-girls school, very lively. And I'm thinking about two girls in particular today. They both came from difficult backgrounds. One father had left the family, another was in jail. And both moms of these girls were in jail. They were being raised by their grandmothers. For one of the girls, in her junior year, her brother was shot dead in the streets by a rival gang. You can imagine how devastating this was for her. And she and her friend had so much going against them. They had such a tough time. And I would marvel that they were even able to get up and get themselves to school every day. It's not difficult to understand that all of this had caused them both to form this protective shell around their heart. They were tough. And they did not receive help easily. They did not want to receive the love and support that we tried to extend to them. In speaking to one of the counselors working with them, I remember the counselor saying, they have a very long road ahead of them, and the hope is that we can help them overcome their fears just enough to make room for love to come into their lives. Help them overcome their fears just enough to make room for love in their lives. That really stayed with me. Love would help them heal and grow, but they needed to let go of many fears before that could happen. There's only so much room within us, right? Within our hearts and our spirits. And when fears take up a lot of space, there isn't much room for anything else. Both the first reading and the gospel for today speak about fear and love. In the first reading from the letter of John, we hear this. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also must love one another. No one has ever seen God, yet if we love one another, God remains in us, and his love is brought to perfection in us. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. What we learn from this is that God's love, when it fully takes root within us, has the strength to drive out fear, whether that be within ourselves or in another person. Love has the capacity to free us from those fears that hold us back. And in the gospel from Mark today, we hear about the stories of the disciples, and they're in their boats trying to cross the sea, and they encounter a storm and they're being tossed about. And Jesus comes to them. He walks on the water to them. And of course, they're terrified. And Jesus says to them, take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. It's interesting to note that the origin of the word fear means danger, distress, or harm. And And the origin of the word afraid means to be removed from peace or well-being. I just found both of those definitions to be fascinating in terms of fear brings us into a place of distress. And the word afraid means that we are taken out of a place of peace. As we begin this new year, it offers us a moment to look within ourselves and reflect on what fears might be taking up space within us, within our hearts, within our spirit, and therefore not allowing room for love. And I don't mean like the usual things that we're afraid of, like the pandemic or the divisions in our country, or that a loved one is sick. I would say that all those are very natural things that can cause fear and anxiety within us. I'm thinking more about those fears that require us to dig deeper inside of us and to be really honest with ourselves. Those fears that we might try to hide from ourselves, and we definitely try to keep from other people seeing. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about the fear of not being good enough, of feeling less than as a spouse, or as a parent, or as a child, or as a friend or coworker. The fear of not being lovable, either by God or by others. The fear of not being forgiven for something that happened in our lives. The fear of being alone or forgotten by those we love, that maybe we don't matter to them as much as we would like. The fear of failure of all different kinds in our relationships or work or certain goals that we set. What if people find out that we are not perfect? The fear of change. Why don't things stay the same? I used to be able to count on something to remain constant, and now I can't. I think that if we're honest with ourselves, we have all experienced one or more of those fears in our lives, or maybe several of them at the same time. I know that I certainly have. And when those fears overtake our spirit, there's little room for anything else. When our fears overtake us, I think we become like the disciples in the boat, terrified, unable to trust that it is Jesus who is coming to help us across the water. We become terrified, and it's hard for us to trust when Jesus says, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Maybe at the start of this new year of 2021, we can take time to reflect on what fears might be at work in us, or what fears have become obstacles for us and our ability to receive and offer love freely and wholeheartedly. Another way to reflect on this is to share with someone else who really knows you, someone that you really trust, and ask them to offer some insights for you. Do they see any fears at work in you? Maybe fears that you're not even aware of. It can be very powerful to enter into a sacred space with someone else that we love and to hear from them how they see us and the ways that they hope for us to be free of fears. As you reflect on this, whether it is something you reflect on yourself or with someone else, whatever you discover, bring those fears in prayer to God. asking for the grace of being set free from those fears, and thus allowing a space for love to enter into us and to take root within us. God's love, when it truly has taken root in us, has the strength to drive out fear, whether it be a fear within ourselves or a fear that we see in someone else. God's love has the capacity to set us free. And what could be better than to start this year with whatever it has in store for us, with a sense of freedom and openness and peace. Let's hold that in prayer with one another as we start this new year together, to be able to enter into this new year wholeheartedly and free. So Happy New Year to you and to all those you love. Please stay safe and healthy. And I wish you much peace and much hope.